This is the third of three videos about the obvious discrepancy between the strong rhetoric that our presidents put out about fighting violent crime and the actions. And if you didn't see those first two videos, please check them out. This video is about the second reason that I think that sending National Guard troops into cities is really not about fighting violent crime. Here's the reason. If you really think that sending National Guard into cities to fight violent crime is an effective way to deal with it, and if you watched my last video, you know that I have some real doubts about that. But if you think that, you really should be sending them to the cities with the highest violent crime rate. Now, interestingly, Washington actually did have the highest violent crime rate in 2022, but in 2024, they've brought their rate down quite a bit. So that if you look at the list of the 200 largest cities in this country, they dropped to number 29. So not even close to the most violent city in America, which means that
Oakland, Little Rock, Detroit, Memphis, Anchorage, Cleveland, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Dayton, Birmingham, St. Louis, Albuquerque, Houston, Baltimore, Shreveport, Minneapolis, Springfield, Missouri, Nashville, Stockton, California, Rockford, Illinois, Tacoma, Toledo, Denver, Tulsa, Aurora, Colorado, and Patterson, New Jersey
all should have National Guard troops before Washington. Some of the other cities mentioned a lot by President Trump: New York, number 67 out of 200. Chicago, number 92 out of 200, which means it's better than 45% of the 200 largest cities in the US. And no, I'm not going to read 91 cities, even if it's 3 times speed. Add to that the fact that the cities most mentioned as needing the National Guard for their violent crime are also cities that have been dropping significantly with their violent crime rate over the last few years. Chicago actually posted 30% less murders in the first 6 months of this year over the same months in 2024, which is a striking drop. Now, crime, both violent and non-violent, has been decreasing pretty much since COVID, almost all over the country, but 30% in 1 year is striking. Now, I have to say there's been a recent tweak to the rhetoric, because as of this week, the stated reason for sending the National Guard is to protect ICE facilities and ICE officers. And to be perfectly frank, there has been some violence in Portland and Chicago against ICE facilities. But if you take a closer look at this is also still really quite fishy, because they're trying to send hundreds and hundreds of National Guard troops to each of these cities for what is frankly a pretty minimal problem when you look at it factually. You could argue that maybe a dozen troops or a dozen extra police officers or maybe 2 dozen, but hundreds and hundreds, it's frankly pretty fishy, given the level of problems they've had. So if it's not about violent crime or protecting ICE, what is this whole National Guard thing about? Well, there's plenty of theories online, some of them sinister and some of them not so sinister. I'm not personally going to make a judgment about the internal workings of our president, but is it about ICE and is it about violent crime? Well, it certainly doesn't look like that to me. So I want to close with this. I want to give you my bonus reason why I don't think the National Guard is about violent crime. And that is that our president seems to be unable to get out of the idea of blaming the Democrats for crime. Crime is not a Democratic problem. It is a U.S. problem. If you look at the 10 states with the highest violent crime rates, 6 of them are run by Republicans, 4 by Democrats. So this is not due to one party or the other. So I've jokingly called myself radical milquetoast moderate in the past. And as a moderate, one of the things that bugs me almost more than anything about our current administration is how nasty and divisive it is. And obviously not just a problem with President Trump, but I firmly believe that most of our really hard problems are not going to get solved by the people on one side of the aisle. And I have to say, if we can't get past our divisiveness and start to work together again, I don't really have a whole lot of hope for our country. So to summarize this video series, I'm not personally convinced there's much action on the part of this administration to match their rhetoric about violent crime. But in view of the stuff that I just said, there is something that would absolutely convince me that this administration was serious about violent crime. And it's not sending the National Guard into cities. But if President Trump decided to send his advisors to Chicago to find out what they've been doing there that's been working so well in decreasing violent crime in order to replicate it across the country, I would be absolutely on board. And I would say we now have an administration that's serious about fighting violent crime. Is that going to happen? We can always hope, right? See you next time. Thanks for watching.